Good evening, ghouls and fiends. Welcome once again to another edition of the Ministry of Horror. I'm your host, as per usual, Tez, and we are here once again live on twitch.tv/Tezius, Tezzrius. You may be catching this at a later point on YouTube or podcast platforms like Apple Podcasts or Spotify. So, hello later listeners and hello live listeners. I hope everyone's well. I hope everyone has had a great week or two with the world of horror. We haven't got a featured presentation now. Normally on the live shows we have a featured presentation. It's been pretty hectic this last week, so I apologize about that. We will, normal service on the live shows will resume when the next live show goes out in a couple of weeks' time, but we do have a couple of reviews coming up. We will be reviewing Under Paris, the latest Netflix exclusive shark attack film. And also we will be reviewing The Exorcism, the new Russell Crowe Exorcist film, not to be confused with the Pope's Exorcist. I'll kind of just talk now that originally I was going to be going to an advanced screening in London for this, so that would have been my second advanced screening, which would have been very, very cool. But I made the decision not to go. Kind of a couple of reasons. The main one really being I'd returned to work on Tuesday, which was the day of the screening. The screening was in the evening. But I was coming back from a couple of days off for download, which we'll talk about in a moment. And that was an experience in and of itself, good and bad, and it's more so the bad, which is why the decision was made. But also, I was coming back to work, and I work in the accounts department. I do management accounts and payroll, and it just felt like there's so much work to catch up on from my few days off. I'd either have to start really early to kind of warrant being able to, also need the approval first. I can't just act fast and loose with my hours, but I would, need to get the approval first, and then also start quite early to be able to, cut out in time to then get to London for the screening. So logistically, it was becoming a bit more difficult to manage. So I let the people know, and fortunately, there was no issue, and they provided me with a screener link, so I was still able to watch the film. So we will review that a bit later on. So there's a few things to kind of go over. Now, my tone, I am aware sometimes when I talk serious, it can come across as instant doom and gloom, which is what my girlfriend will say. If I suddenly have a serious tone to my voice, she automatically assumes that means I'm going to be talking about something bad or there's something to worry about coming up. And that's not really the case usually ever. I rarely have bad news, at least as far as I'm aware. I'll probably be told otherwise at some point. No, we got a few things to discuss. So, first things first, I went to the Download Festival this past weekend. Download Festival, if you don't know, is it was a metal festival in the UK. It's now a more metal rock alternative. I mean, it's always had a bit of everything, but in the past, it's traditionally been very, legends of heavy metal headliners or established heavy metal headliners. And then this year, they've gone for a bit more of a mixture of metal, emo, pop punk. It's a bit of everything for everyone, which in and of itself does attract a bit of a different crowd, which isn't always a good thing. But, ultimately, different strokes for different folks. But there did seem to be a lot more gobby gobshites, which you don't normally get at metal festivals. Metal normally has this image of being super aggressive and angry because the music's super aggressive and angry, but really the audience are the most chill usually and help everyone out. And it's when you then start getting a more mainstream audience in because the act's playing, you then tend to get a few more gobshites who can ruin the experience for some. Now, that wasn't my experience. That wasn't necessarily what happened to me. We've got a few people in the chat currently. We've got Gruff. Hey, Gruff. We've got Eddie the Beast. Hey, Eddie. We've also got Fran. Fran says, we know you only went for Busted. No. funnily enough, they weren't on my my list of bands to watch. But we had a bit of an experience. So we went for the weekend, but we stayed at a B&B, bed and breakfast. The idea being really was just, it's a bit more enjoyable when you're getting into your 30s to be able to shower in the morning, have an actual bed to sleep on, and have some good food for the day. You also have to factor in there's a bit more sort of traveling around, but we had a good plan in place. We had a B&B about 20 minutes away from the venue. And I'd done a bit of work after some advice from my sister and then some encouragement from Victoria to look into accessibility access. So without going into all the details, I'll say as a blanket statement, I have a weak ankle. One of my ankles is weak. There's a lot more to it than that, but I don't want to bore people on the internet with my medical history. So it had been kind of, look, there are options there for accessibility, and that things can be a bit easier for you and be a bit less painful, because essentially long periods of walking and long periods of standing can just cause pain and blah blah blah, make things more painful, so on and so forth. You get the gist. So anyway, we went and watched a few bands. I can't even remember who we watched on the Friday. Friday wasn't one of the better sort of lineup days. Victoria had gone off to watch Busted, while I watched a sort of synth Terminator-esque band called Health, who were pretty good, but the singer was quite whiny. I didn't really like that. She very quickly came back from that because the tent that had Wheatus and Busted in was clearly too small for the sort of audience that was going to be attracted to those people. So the tent was overflowing. Some drunk idiot elbowed her and was then being really sexually inappropriate in front of her. Bear in mind, this drunk guy was with his girlfriend, who was doing the usual, just ignore him, he's drunk, when he's acting like an absolute arse. When I'm getting told all this later on when she came back to find me, it was just like, okay, I don't know how I'm going to see this person, the tens of thousands of people here, but just if you do see him, please point him out to me. I would like to have a word with him. We didn't see him again, but that was one issue we encountered, which wasn't so great. Now, the main crux of why I'm talking about download, and don't worry, we will get to the horror. I normally sort of do these kind of life updates post-show, but you know what? It doesn't matter, screw it. And one of the things that we had looked into was this whole, with this accessibility, was that we can get dropped off at an accessibility point, which worked great. We got a taxi in or an Uber in, got dropped off the accessibility point, and were able to pretty much go 2-minute walk straight into the arena. Really great. The end of it was the issue. So the documentation that I'd been sent had said that shuttle buses run at the venue to take you from the arena to accessibility campsite, the transportation hub, which is where you can get pick up, drop off, taxi rank, Uber drop off, and other points, but I don't give a shit about other points. So we made a point to, during the first day there, the Friday, go and speak to the accessibility hub to just find out what is the process here. Because is there a timetable? What point do we need to go to? And they just said, yeah, just go up to the main arena entrance. Yeah, they'll sort you out there, pick you up on the shuttle, take you to your destination. Okay, cool, sounds great. That didn't happen. It got to the headlines, which was Queens of the Stone Age, who I like some of their stuff. I haven't really listened to much of them for a few albums. But we'd seen a few bands that we enjoyed. I was going to quickly draw up the list, but I can't remember who was on the Friday. And the app has automatically updated to the next year, so it doesn't have who I'd kind of earmarked as I want to watch. Okay, here it does. So we'd seen Blackstone Cherry. We also spent like almost 2 hours in the merch queue because the merch queue was not moving. One of the other perks apparently with accessibility is skip the queue. Not with the merch queue. It worked with the beer tent. amazingly, but not with the merch queue. So we saw Blackstone Cherry. We saw Mr. Bungle, who were absolutely incredible, fans of Faith No More, Slayer, Anthrax, members of all those bands in Mr. Bungle. They were brilliant. Health and Queens of the Stone Age. Couple of other bands, but not really paying attention. Anyway, get to the arena entrance exit. Okay, where do we go for the shuttle bus? Don't know. There's no on-site vehicles. There's no on-site vehicles here. There's a curfew. Like, okay, but there's meant to be a shuttle bus, an accessibility shuttle bus. Right, walk down the path and then talk to them there. So we proceed to walk down the path, and I will just say here for context, I had a crutch with me. So sometimes if I'm going to an event where I know I'm going to have to do a lot of walking, I will bring a walking stick. I don't have to use a walking stick day to day, but when I know that I'm going to have to be on my feet for a long period or doing a lot of walking, I have a crutch or a walking stick there as a bit of an aid. So we walk down this path. And bearing in mind, the ground has got quite bad because it's the start of the weekend, heavy rain. The rain was terrible. Whenever I've been to download in the past, it's always been scorching heat. The ground's really dry, no issues. So again, when mobility isn't amazing and then the ground is starting to turn to sludge, it just makes things a bit more difficult. So we walk down the path, we speak to these other guards, they've got no idea, they start phoning around, and the head of this, well, he was either part of security, he was part of the Oxfam volunteers, I can't exactly remember. He does essentially start mocking me. He's kind of just saying, well, what's actually wrong with you then? Oh, why can't they just do this then? What does it look like? All right, well, I'm sure you can just keep on, he's just being a little bit patronizing, but he wasn't doing it in such a way where it was like overtly malicious, where I felt I could take exception to it, because I'm kind of used to it, which, again, when I said that to my girlfriend, it really upset her, because I shouldn't be used to it, but it's like, it's just such is life. So he was being a prick, essentially, and we ended up having to walk to the taxi rank, which wasn't ideal, especially the line for like wheelchair access to the taxi ranks was just across like a field of uncut high grass that was all just really bumpy and dodgy, so that just made it more difficult. Anyway, get to Saturday. The ground is sludge, just absolute shite everywhere. Victoria's fuming from what happened last night, so we go and we raise a complaint. They mark it down, they're really apologetic. They give us these other accessibility wristbands so we can go into accessibility viewing, which was a bit hit and miss. It wasn't the seated viewing, like the raised viewing. But yeah, it was like the ground viewing, which main stage great, second stage shit. Saw some bands. Rob and Ramesh were there, which is quite cool, but a lot of bands got delayed, which wasn't so good. Bands that I saw, Bleed From Within, were incredible. Enter Shikari were very good. I don't actually like that many of their songs, I found out, but some of the songs I did like were very good. The Offspring were very good. Pantera were incredible. I didn't get to see Fear Factory, which kind of sucked, but the point for that was, when we were watching Pantera, I insisted I'm standing up, I'm not using a chair, and they were incredible, blew my mind. I've instantly bought tickets for their next shows in London, because I just, I've loved them since I got into them, which unfortunately was after they'd split up and all that stuff. And we watched a little bit of Fall Out Boy, but after standing and watching the Pantera set, which is incredible, waiting around for them to come on stage for a while, my ankle was hurting a fair bit, so we're then making our way back across to the main stage to watch a little bit of Fall Out Boy. I don't really like Fall Out Boy. Victoria likes a few of their songs, but wouldn't necessarily say she's a fan. But my ankle is hurting. The ground is a sludge mess. Like, people are slip sliding in. It's disgusting. And we get there, and I'm like, okay, I kind of need to sit down. I'd started going a bit white because I think I was just struggling a bit. Hadn't eaten for a while, and there's just quite a lot of pain. She went to the accessibility center again to say, right, what exactly is the process, because we are not having what happened last night happen again. They gave her clear instructions, said there is a transportation embargo between the hours of like 10 and half 11 or something like that. No vehicles on site. So as long as you get there before 10, you're fine. So we quickly pack up our chairs. I'm hobbling around. I'm on a mission. Just get to there. We get to there at like quarter to 10, 9:30. No, it's 9:30 we left actually. They've got no idea. We speak to one exit. They've got no idea. We speak to the other exit. Yeah, don't know. I mean, there's the accessibility park in there. So head there. We head there. We talk to them. Blah blah blah. It's just, and Victoria's then starting to cry because she's just getting so frustrated with how difficult everyone is being. Like, basically, the left hand doesn't speak to the right at these events. The accessibility team say, well, this is what should be happening, supposedly. The main arena and exits are like, no, there's no shuttle buses going on around here. Like, we even had it when they said, okay, yeah, if they go to this point, a shuttle bus will come and pick them up. So we go to that point, we go, where's the shuttle bus? What's happening? Have to wait around again while they talk. Eventually they say, because of the cut off, the next ones won't be running till 11:30, at which point it doesn't necessarily mean it will be here at 11:30, so you could then be waiting a further half hour, whatever. So we make our way. Eventually, you know, I'm just like, look, I'm okay. Let's just do it. Like, yeah, the ground is shit. It's going to be a difficult walk. Let's just do it to get it out of the way. You know, we can do it. And like Victoria, God bless her, was just like, right, I'm carrying both chairs, and I'm like, I can carry one. You know, I've got one arm free, but she's like, no, she just wants me to be okay. So soldiering on through, blah blah blah. Get to the taxi rank, huge queue compared to the previous night when we kind of just got straight there. I don't know if we'd had the delays, but we left at a similar time from Queens of Stone Age to Fallout Boy. We get to the main taxi rank, and it's just a huge queue which isn't moving. The rain is pouring down. Victoria's waterproof coat turns out more water resistant than waterproof, so she is soaked through to the bone. And after a few hours of this, she's then stood there shivering. But she's more focused on me being okay. She's insisting I sit on a chair while we're in the queue rather than just stand up and prolong the pain. So I did, you know. And then, you know, she had to force me to have some salt and vinegar crisps because I needed some salt. You know, I needed to be hydrated. Hadn't drunk any water. I've just been drinking beer and whatnot. So we left the arena at 9:30. We eventually got a taxi at 1:30 in the morning after just continuous rain because the queue wasn't moving. Partially, this was due to all of the exits in the arena had been closed bar one for whatever reason, to funnel traffic down one path. Supposedly it's because the other ones have been waterlogged with mud, but essentially all traffic was going through one lane. Absolute nonsense. And what was then making things even more difficult is what people had started doing, which is absolute... I was going to drop a C-bomb then. I'll just say absolute dickhead behaviour. Was they were leaving the taxi rank queue, pulling open the pathway, you know, the barricade, whatever, that streamlines where the path goes, to get onto the road and head down the path where the taxis would be coming down, so they could just flag the taxis before they got to the taxi rank. Which I just think, I understand their frustration, but we're all in this same position together, and you're now just skipping ahead because you're frustrated. Like, that was just ridiculous, and the staff were doing nothing about it. So we eventually got home at 1:30. I've just told her, right, you need to warm up quick, have a hot shower, put on dry clothes and all that. So the following morning, I'm struggling with pain. Victoria's fuming with how, you know, I've been treated and whatnot this weekend. And as much as there was a lot of bands we wanted to watch on Sunday, like I wanted to see Machine Head, she wanted to see Limp Bizkit, Code Orange I really wanted to see, Kerry King I really wanted to see. Yeah, quite a few bands were on Sunday. We just kind of decided, let's just go home, because we're both... The bed wasn't great at the B&B. The B&B was incredible. The food was great. great value for money. But we were just both like, we can't do. We'd go and watch these bands. We'd be in the exact same situation, probably even worse in the evening. The ground won't have recovered. Funnily enough, the ground was actually the weather was actually sunny on the Sunday, which is just typical. But the ground won't have recovered. It would just be terrible. So we made the decision to come home. I think we're going to be looking into what we can do, because the service that I'd been offered and been advised was being provided wasn't provided. And if we'd had known that that wasn't the case, we would have made alternate arrangements. But the fact is, the documentation said this is what's available for accessibility, and it wasn't. And we were just getting told different things by different people that work there, that were in charge of those sort of things, and it isn't good enough. I mean, I'm one of those people that just kind of goes, oh well, is what it is. But I mean, at the end of the day, it really isn't. So that was one thing. Now, it isn't all doom and gloom, guys, in terms of what's been going on when I talk about news. And I know my preambles don't quite normally go this long. I'll just wrap things up by saying I haven't done any gaming this week other than a bit of Ghost of Tsushima. I've jumped back into that, the director's cut. It's beautiful. But really, I haven't done much of any gaming recently. Sunday, I'm going to do a lot of gaming. I may jump on stream, don't know yet. But something else occurred this week, and if you're watching live, you'll see what I'm talking about on screen in 3, 2, 1. If you're watching on screen, you'll see a hand. That is not my hand, I will just confirm. But I asked Victoria a question, and thankfully, she said yes. So, yeah, we are engaged. I can confirm engaged to be married. We are looking at going to Vegas next year, which will be very, very cool. Not a drive-through Elvis wedding, but just like a destination wedding, something with, like, you know, just friends and family. We'll do some sort of party when we get back to the UK, but this is all the plan. You know, a lot of saving to be done between now and then. A lot of saving. But there's also a lot of gigs I want to go to, so it's a balancing act. You know, we've booked Pantera, we've booked Sepultura, but you know, that's thank you for the congratulations in the chat, guys. Thank you very much. So yes, me and Victoria are engaged. I put a ring on it, as they say. So there we go, and the score I will give that on the reviews is 10 out of 10. I think that's possibly our first 10 out of 10 on Ministry of Horror. I don't actually think I've given anything a 10 out of 10. I'm always quite critical of films. Anyway, so, like I say, there was a lot of moaning at the start about download. It's not all doom and gloom. So, without further ado, I think it's probably about time that we get into a bit of the latest in the world of horror news. This is the news. Oh, 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 oh. Sorry, I'm so thirsty. All that talking. It's a great thing with the news music. It apparently goes on for a whole 28 minutes, so I'll only use 30 seconds of it. It's a great opportunity to get a drink. Chug, chug, chug. Exactly, Eddie. So, this is the latest in the world of horror news. This all comes from Bloody Disgusting, as per usual. Check them out. They've always got great articles. All that stuff. This is a John Squires write-up. It's the 6 new horror movie releases this week, including The Exorcism, starring Russell Crowe. So, skip past all that. So, based on the novel by John Ajvir, Neon brought the horror drama Handling the Undead home this past Tuesday, and it's now available on VOD. In the film, on a hot summer day in Oslo, the dead mysteriously awaken, and 3 families are thrown into chaos when their deceased loved ones come back to them. Who are they, and what do they want? A family is faced with the mother's reawakening before they have even mourned her death after a car accident. An elderly woman gets the love of her life back the same day she has buried her. A grandfather rescues his grandchild from the gravesite in a desperate attempt to get his daughter out of her depression. Thea Hivstadal directed Handling the Undead, which features a screenplay by Jean Ajvid. I can't read these names, I'm so sorry. We talked about this the other week on the Horror News, but it's now available on VOD. So the writer, John, just say John, I'm sorry, who did Let the Right One In. It's an incredible novel. I've already talked about that. And the initial synopsis of this did remind me of a show, and I did check, it was called The Return. The Returned? The Returns. I did the same thing last time. I think it's called The Returned, which involved a school bus crash. And then I think 3 years later, the kid's just mysteriously returning home like nothing's wrong. Kind of sounds similar to that. I don't know if there's any connection or whatnot. But if this has the same level of tight narrative as Let the Right One In, I will give it a watch. If it drops onto any streaming platform or I remember and it gets a UK release, I'll check it out. I haven't heard about it having a UK release just yet. I imagine it will probably turn up on Arrow, at some point in the future. Eddie in the chat is chortling at my pronunciations or my butchering of people's names, essentially. Terrible. Next up, writer-director Casey Keat makes her feature debut of the horror comedy Scream Therapy, which also released onto VOD outlets at home this past Tuesday. In Scream Therapy, after Avery breaks up with her boyfriend of 7 years, her best friends whisk her away to the Wonder Valley Desert for a weekend of drinking, drugs, and restorative scream therapy. Their vacation takes a sharp turn when they cross paths with Jeremiah and Zachariah, demon-worshipping incels who are on a very pressing human sacrifice deadline. When the ritual goes horribly wrong for the incels, the ladies are left with two choices: find sacrifices of their own, or have their souls ripped out when the sun rises. With only hours to complete an impossible task, the best friends will have to defeat desert psychos, conspiracy theorist lunatics, and the incel cult leader, the Sovereign, to survive. Brian Flaccus, Claire Delamar, Jerry Courtney Austin, Harley Bronwyn, Mandy Chung, and Rochelle Anderson star in the film. Yeah, it could be good. I haven't watched the trailer. I mean, horror comedies are such a difficult subgenre to nail because more often than not, they just don't have that balance of being actually funny and quote unquote for a horror film scary. Usually the horror element can just be a slapstick add-on, or it's a horror film but with these really lame jokes peppered in that just give it a strange mood. If it works, great. There's plenty of films that do work. I mean, obviously the main one people know is Shaun of the Dead. There's plenty of other ones that have come along. I mean, was it the Scout's Guide to the Zombie Apocalypse? Something like that. That's pretty good. I think that's quite an underrated one. But don't know. I would need to check out the trailer, and I just haven't had time to do that to see whether it looks like this one will nail it. I'm not familiar with any of the names involved. I mean, writer-director Casey Keat, not sure whether it's a feature debut, so of course I won't be aware. But yeah, the stars: Brian Flaccus, Claire Delamar, Jerry Courtney Austin, Harley Bronwyn, Mandy Chung, and Rochelle Anderson. Not familiar, so I couldn't say. Fran's got a few good ones there. Cabin in the Woods, Tucker and Dale versus Evil. Yeah, they get it. They get the balance right. Next up, Russell Crowe, known for The Pope's Exorcist, stars in the new possession horror movie, The Exorcism, which Vertical has brought to theatres nationwide beginning today, June 21st. Joshua John Miller, who wrote 2015's The Final Girls, which is very good. That is a film that gets the horror comedy balanced well. This one is personal for Miller, as his late father was the star of the best possession movie ever made. Miller. Okay, yep. So, yeah, we know where that's going. If you know, you know. The Exorcism follows Anthony Miller, a troubled actor who begins to unravel while shooting a supernatural horror film. His estranged daughter, played by Ryan Simpkins, wonders if he's slipping back into his past addictions or if there's something more sinister at play. Sam Worthington, Chloe Bailey, Adam Goldberg, and David Hyde Pierce also star. Of particular note, Kevin Williamson produced The Exorcism. So we will be reviewing that a bit later on. Next up, based on Sweden's most notorious serial killer, and sorry, that's the reason why I won't talk too much about The Exorcism now, because you'll hear my thoughts on the film later. Based on Sweden's most notorious serial killer, Thomas Quick, aka Sture Bergwall, Scandinavian thriller What Remains was released into theatres and on VOD outlets today. Gustav Skarsgård, Andrea Riseborough, and Stellan Skarsgård star in the film, a fictionalised account of the true story. In a psychiatric hospital, an alleged serial killer, his therapist, and a police detective seek to solve a brutal cold case before their obsessive quest for the truth consumes them all. Quick confessed to more than 30 murders over 3 decades, the first committed when he was only 14 years old. He later retracted his confessions, saying that he'd been heavily medicated and seeking attention. Swedish journalists following the case claimed that a cult-like group led by psychologist Margit Norell manipulated the police and talked Bergwall into false confessions. His case is now considered Sweden's most infamous miscarriage of justice. What Remains marks the feature directorial debut of Ran Huang. Okay, now that sounds pretty good, and that's a very good cast. I don't know Gustav Skarsgård, who's in Vikings, and it's one of those shows that's been on my list for a very long time. I think I've seen the opening episode, and similar to The Kingdom, I've seen the opening episode, and I haven't given it a chance to get a few episodes in. It's just, I've watched the one episode, gone, no, it seems pretty good, just haven't got around to continuing. But Andrea Riseborough, we've talked before about Mandy, incredible film. Stellan Skarsgård is a legendary actor. So that does sound pretty good. Based on a true story, which can always be... There's always that line of taste. And the films based on true stories can obviously be incredibly powerful because you know that this comes from... a basis of reality. But then there's also that point where a horror film, thriller film that's based on a true story involving a real-life serial killer case, it can sometimes potentially become exploitative or, glorifying the killer, those sort of things. This doesn't sound like it would be going down that route, and I will have to watch the trailer for that. One day I'll make sure I actually have time to watch the trailers before our show goes live. The page has frozen. Oh god, right, okay. Blood Disgusting Site's having a funny one. Next up, a young vampire struggles with the moral dilemma surrounding her need for blood, but she may have found a solution in a young man with suicidal tendencies in Humanist Vampire Seeking Consenting Suicidal Person, which opens in select theatres today. A nationwide rollout will follow, but for now the film is limited to theatres in New York City and Los Angeles. The vampire comedy was co-written and directed by Ariane Louise Sees. Sarah Montpetit stars as Sasha, a teenage vampire who's too empathetic to hunt down prey to feast on their blood. When her parents push her out of the nest and stop providing blood bags for her, which she sucks down like Capri Sun, she needs to learn how to take care of herself. When Sasha meets the suicidal kindred spirit Paul, played by Felix Antoine Bernard, they come to a friendly agreement that he will give his life to save hers, though of course things don't end up being as cut and dried as they had planned. That sounds like that could be pretty good. I mean, I guess it really depends on how much they lean into the comedy elements or not. Initially, I was thinking the blurb sounded like it could be kind of similar to a film that came out a year or two ago called My Heart Can Only Beat If You Tell It To. Something like that. It's quite a long title. And that was really good. Really good indie film about essentially suspected vampirism. Yeah, that is definitely one worth giving a watch. I might actually have to track it down again. I think it might have been on Shudder or Arrow, and I watched it that way a little while ago, but I wouldn't mind giving that a rewatch. Instead of finding new films to watch, I'm reminding myself of good films that I want to rewatch. But this one sounds pretty interesting, I have to say. I guess it really just depends on that balance. You know, it is difficult. Fran in the chat says another Skarsgård. Is that number 4? Well, there's Stellan Skarsgård. Now Gustav Skarsgård. There's Bill Skarsgård. And who's the other one who's in stuff? Oh, Fran in the chat with my heart can't beat unless you tell it to. Yeah, that's pretty good. I quite like that. Okay, that came out during a period of us getting some kind of decent vampire films for the first time in a while, including Jacob's Wife with Barbara Crampton on Shudder. That is very good. Alexandra Skarsgård is in True Blood. Right, there we go. Well, I think that's probably 4. There's probably more. I'm pretty sure there's another older, bold one. I don't know. I can't remember. Next up, based on the successful New York Times best-selling book by B.A. Paris, the final new release of the week is Blackwater Lane, available on VOD in select theatres beginning today. Jeff Calentano directed the film, written by Elizabeth Fowler. After witnessing a tragedy on a dangerous country road, Cass is visited by a ghostly presence and begins to question her sanity. As these otherworldly experiences intensify, Cass is driven closer to the brink until she begins to assemble the pieces of a horrific plot against her. Minka Kelly, Maggie Grace, and Dermot Mulroney star. I don't know anything about B.A. Paris. I'm not familiar with any books by B.A. Paris. Blackwater Lane, yeah, it could be a decent thriller. I'm always down for a new thriller. I have to admit, when I see Dermot Mulroney in a film, I don't know why, but he's one of those actors where I automatically think, lower my expectations slightly. It's not like he's specifically a bad actor, I wouldn't say that, but just when I see him appear in things, I think the exception to the rule was Scream 6, and he is quite campy in that. Which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I actually really enjoyed Scream 6. But most of the time when I see Dermot Mulroney pop up in something, I think, oh, God. I don't know what it is. He's just one of those actors that I think, oh, this could be questionable. Yeah, I'm not familiar with Minka Kelly, and Maggie Grace has been in things. Don't know. I think I recognise her. I want to say Smallville, but I don't think she's from Smallville. She's been in things. Anyway, let's move on to the rest of the horror news, because we've got quite a lot. Here's the latest update on A24's Crystal Lake. Charlize Theron as Pamela Voorhees? ? Comes from John Squires. A24 and Peacock's planned Friday the 13th television series Crystal Lake went up in smoke earlier this year, with showrunner Brian Fuller being fired from the project and leaving the fate of the small screen project unclear. So what really happened? The Wrap just dropped one hell of an exclusive report untangling the behind-the-scenes mess. To refresh your memory before we dive in, Peacock had given the project a straight-to-series order in 2022, with Crystal Lake being described as an expanded prequel to the original Friday the 13th franchise, featuring both Jason Voorhees and his mother, Pamela. According to the Wrap's new report, Charlize Theron was being eyed to play Mrs. Voorhees. Other new details from the Wrap's report reveal that the episode written by Kevin Williamson of Scream fame was going to take place entirely on a frozen Crystal Lake, with Williamson recently describing the episode as an hour-long chase. Friday the 13th fans have been begging for a Winterset Friday installment for many years now, and A24 is set to deliver just that. Additionally, Vincenzo Natali, who did Cube and Splice, and Kimberly Pierce, Boys Don't Cry and Carrie, was set to direct episodes, with the budget ballooning to around $10 million per episode. With 8 episodes in total planned for the first season, it would have cost A24 roughly $85 million to bring the series to life, with additional seasons being planned by the studio. The Wrap's report notes, in the grand ambition of Crystal Lake, each season would be a deconstruction of the first 4 Paramount movies. The series would incorporate lore from several sequels, but remix that material in a way similar to Fuller's Hannibal. Vincenzo Natali had recently tweeted, "I've read the first 2 episodes. Brian Fuller's Crystal Lake was well on its way to becoming another Hannibal-level reinvention that was simultaneously beautiful, sad, poetic, funny, and horrifying. I mourn its passing." So what happened? According to the Wrap, Brian Fuller was fired from Crystal Lake just 3 months before production was set to begin in the summer. The rap notes Crystal Lake was plagued by inexperienced production executives making questionable decisions, problems with the show's writing staff, and conflicts between showrunners and executives. Oh, lordy, lordy. A24 and Peacock are now searching for a new showrunner for the series, with Nick Antosca, who did Channel Zero and Brand New Cherry Flavour, reportedly in the mix to potentially take over. Okay, I mean, when I'd heard about this, I was initially kind of skeptical because I enjoyed the Friday the 13th films, but they've never really been considered highbrow. I think that is fair to say. You know what you're getting with the Friday the 13th film. You're getting stalk and slash, over-the-top violence and gore, Jason or an unseen assailant in the first film doing some gnarly kills. But it's never really been that deep. It hasn't really necessarily had that kind of level of lore, or outside of the Tommy Jarvis films, much of a kind of central protagonist, whereas, you know, Halloween's obviously had Laurie and God, my memory's suddenly gone terrible. Her daughter Jamie in 4 and 5, and to an extent 6. But yeah, it's never been considered that highbrow, so I was always a bit like, okay, it's good to be getting more Jason finally, but a prequel series, oh god. But I heard Brian Fuller was involved, and I absolutely love Hannibal, so in his good hands to have this in, or was, I felt. So, I mean, A24, it would have roughly cost them 84 million. Now, A24 have made incredibly profitable films. Some of their films have done very, very well, but they don't, to my knowledge, normally make films with huge budgets. Kind of similar to how Blumhouse, you know, would make films like Conjuring, the first Conjuring. No, they didn't do Conjuring, sorry. Insidious. And did they do the Conjuring? I'll say Insidious. I'm pretty sure they did Insidious. I'm getting confused now. And I'm pretty sure that those Insidious films, the first few, the budget was sub 10 million, but would make hundreds of millions. It's a little bit questionable there. I just don't see them being that flagrant with the budget. I don't know all the ins and outs, of course, but it did seem a little bit off. But if Nick Antosca was to take over, I mean, I really enjoy Channel Zero. Each season is incredibly different. There's an art approach to them. The gore is disgusting, but not so much that it just makes you want to turn the program off. But I really think Channel Zero is one of those shows that people just slept on. Each season, I think, is very, very good. Brand New Cherry Flavour, I just never got around to watching. I heard very mixed things about that, so who knows there. There's a few things popping off in the chat. So Eddie has said in regards to Friday the 13th, about time they make a return. I fully agree. Eddie has a question for me. What do I think is better, the originals of the films or the remakes? I guess it depends if we're talking generalized, because I think the originals are usually the best for a reason, because they are the blueprint, you know, and the remakes rarely exceeded. I say rarely because it does sometimes occur, but like, I think you can have an incredible remake, and like some people assume all remakes are dog shit. I don't think that's the case, and I think that is quite unfair. Because there are remakes like Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I really think that's a great remake. I don't think it's better than the original, but I think it is a great remake. The Friday the 13th film with Padalecki, whatever his name is, the guy out of Supernatural, not Jensen Atkins, but Jared Padalecki. That was pretty good. I mean, that was kind of like a bit of a remake of 1 to 3 in one. It was kind of, it started with like the end of 1, but it was pretty good. I liked the approach that they went for. But then you've got Nightmare on Elm Street. The remake for that, it's terrible. All of the constant fake outs for the dreams as jump scares was just missing the point completely. The only thing they did was sort of play around with the idea of, did the parents get it wrong? Was he actually innocent? Because that would have been quite interesting. Like, this guy has a reason to want revenge on the kids of the people who killed him wrongfully many years ago. That would have been an interesting little twist. Turns out he wasn't innocent. He was a bad man. But yeah, that was a terrible film. So originals are usually better. But that being said, sometimes in a series, I can love a sequel the most out of the series. And I know that sequel isn't necessarily a better film, but something about it can just become a bit of a comfort film. Like, it can be a mixture of the score, the acting, certain moments, certain scenes in the film. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's a better film than the original, but I can just find myself drawn to enjoying that one more. Doesn't mean I don't enjoy the original anyway. You get what I mean. Fran in the chat says, are we supposed to buy horny camp counselors who would go for girls their age? If Charlize Theron was on the campgrounds, Jason be saved by the girls as they've got nothing else to do. It's a fair point. It's a fair point. They'd have to make Charlize quite frumpy. Saying that, her portrayal of Eileen Wuornos in Monster, it's possible. It's possible. So let's just bear that in mind. We don't know how they'd have done her up for the film. Now, this is something Victoria actually showed me on Instagram the other day. Universal Orlando fully details a dark universe theme park with concept art and more. John Squires writes up, Universal's Dark Universe may have been a short-lived experience in the world of cinema, but in the world of Universal theme parks, the Dark Universe is just getting started. Earlier this year, Universal announced Universal Epic Universe, a brand new multi-world experience coming to Universal Orlando in 2025. The Dark Universe is one of the experience's 5 epic worlds, and today brings full details, concept art, and everything you need to know. So the press release is here. It's alive! It's alive! Next year, Universal, the pioneer of the horror genre, will bring its timeless monsters to the present day with the debut of Dark Universe, one of the 5 immersive worlds featured at the all-new Universal Epic Universe opening in 2025. The most mysterious world of Universal Orlando's newest theme park, this captivating new land will envelop guests in monstrous adventures across various attractions, shops, restaurants, and character meet and greets that will thrill everyone from families to classic monsters alike. Okay. I'm down for that. So, obviously, at the top of the show, we mentioned aiming to get married in Vegas next year, and part of that would be flying over to Orlando, or to Florida in general, at the end to do the parks and also then spend some time at her parents' place because her parents have a property out there. And this just is perfect timing, quite frankly. If this comes up, if this gets open before we go, then babooey, I will be going. We will be going, of course. So next up, I might streamline down a few of these. I don't think I need to talk about. Ishana Night Shyamalan's The Watchers heads home to digital next week. This is from Megan Navarro. You can't see them, but they see everything in Ishana Night Shyamalan's feature debut, The Watchers. And if you miss The Watchers in theatres, you can watch it at home as soon as next week. The Watchers opened in theatres on June 7th and will be available on premium video on demand on Friday, June 28th. Warner Brothers Discovery also revealed in the press release for the film's at-home streaming release that The Watchers will be released on 4K UHD, Blu-ray and DVD on August 27th. The film follows Mina, a 28-year-old artist who gets stranded in an expansive, untouched forest in Western Ireland. When Mina finds shelter, she unknowingly becomes trapped alongside 3 strangers who are watched and stalked by mysterious creatures each night. The Watchers stars Dakota Fanning, Georgina Campbell, Oliver Finnegan and Olwen Fura. The mystery horror film is produced by M. Night Shyamalan, Ashwan Rajit, and Nimit Makad. The executive producers are Joe Homewood and Stephen Debitzer. It's based on a novel by A.M. Shine. So if this turns up on Sky Cinema or Netflix, I'll give it a watch. But the trailers, I just thought, this is just one of those one of those films where it's all about the setup. I can imagine there isn't much payoff. And that can sometimes work well. Other times you can almost kind of sniff out that this is just going to be dull. I don't know if it is. I haven't, as I say, I haven't seen it, but just that setup just doesn't fill me with really much interest, I have to say. I can imagine there's some cop-out twist at the end, and that's not just because it's a Shyamalan joint, albeit his daughter, but not fussed. We won't talk about that. Now, this is kind of interesting. The Monkey, Stephen King horror movie, dated for February 2025 release. John Squire's write-up. An adaptation of the Stephen King story, horror movie The Monkey, is headed our way early next year from Neon. Producer James Wan and director Osgood Perkins, who has done Longlegs, which I can't wait for Longlegs. It looks incredible. The Monkey will release in theatres February 21st, 2025. It's a short story that appeared in Skeleton Crew, a 1985 collection that also featured The Mist, The Jaunt, which is terrifying, The Raft, Survivor Type, The Reach, and more. Yeah, there are a lot of great stories in Skeleton Crew, I must say. Theo James stars alongside Tatiana Maslany, Elijah Wood, Christian Convery, Colin O'Brien, Rowan Campbell, and Sarah Levi. Osgood Perkins wrote the screenplay for the feature film adaptation, and he also directed the upcoming movie. In The Monkey, when twin brothers Hal and Bill discover their father's old monkey toy in the attic, a series of gruesome deaths start occurring all around them. The brothers decide to throw the monkey away and move on with their lives, growing apart over the years. But when the mysterious deaths begin again, the brothers must reunite to find a way to destroy the monkey for good before it takes the lives of everyone close to them. So, if people are just hearing that and thinking, what is this, a murderous monkey? It's one of those kind of wind-up toys where you've got like a little monkey with a waistcoat on. It's got symbols that it clacks together. The story that it's based on is pretty damn good. And like I say, Skeleton Crew has got some really good stories in it. The Mist being one. And yeah, the Jaunt is brilliant. The Raft has a couple of questionable moments in it, but it's Stephen King. You're going to get some questionable moments in his 80s and some 90s output. Now, gamers, some gaming news. The Elden Tree, not Elden Tree, what the fuck am I saying? The Elden Ring expansion, Shadow of the Erd Tree, is available today. This is from Mike Wilson. Elden Ring will obviously be selling more copies today now that the long-awaited expansion, Shadow of the Erd Tree, is available for purchase on PS4, PS5, Xbox One, the Xbox Series, and PC via Steam. Accompanying the launch is the game's launch trailer, which is appropriately epic in tone, featuring several new monsters for you to slay or die trying. In Elden Ring Shadow of the Erd Tree, players step into the realm of Shadow to embark on a new adventure full of mysteries and danger, setting off on a journey where they will confront threatening bosses and discover new spells, abilities, weapons, and armor. Following in the footsteps of Michaela, the once tarnished legions who rose to Elden Lord may now need to leave their grace behind as they enter a sinister new chapter and unravel the dark side of the Elden Ring story. And just in case you were wondering, the various collector's editions for the new Shadow of the Erd Tree expansion are now available in the Bandai Namco store. So, Elden Ring. Now, the trailers for Shadow of the Erd Tree do look incredible. And I would like to play it. If I thought there was any point in me purchasing it, because from my understanding, you need to have defeated an incredibly tough boss to open up the area to go into the expansion. Now, Elden Ring, like all the FromSoft games, are games where they look incredible. The lore, when you hear people that know about it talk about it, sounds incredible. It's great to watch Let's Plays of it. You know, RKG, I'm very behind on RKG. I do need to catch up. I think the difficulty is where more of their recent videos have been like 1.5 hours, 2 hours plus each time, and where I've got such a backlog, it's just made it difficult for me to go, right, now I'm going to commit to catching up. But they're very good at it because they're quite funny. And I have played Dark Souls 1, 2, and 3. Bloodborne. I've completed Bloodborne. That was only because there was a pre-patch cheat that meant that I could level up a lot. If I didn't have that cheat, there's no way in hell that I'd have ever been able to complete that game. I tend to do okay to a certain point, and then I just find myself running through the level to get to the next boss and trying to avoid getting killed. And so the difficulty is then I'm probably not leveling up the right way, or I'm probably then going into areas under-leveled because I haven't done enough farming or just killing the regular enemies. I just find that I get to a point where regular enemies will seem so unbeatable, and then bosses seem a bit more beatable, which is just backwards. But I want to be good at these Elden Ring and Dark Souls 3, but I always tend to do okay. I always tend to get a good amount into it. Grand scheme of things, not that far, but get through a good amount of bosses until I just hit a point where I'm just like, I don't know what I can be doing differently. And it just becomes too frustrating. I don't play games for a challenge. And I know that's a lot of people think, well, what's the point in playing games if there isn't a challenge? I like a good story. And I love the story with Elden Ring and FromSoft games. I love the influence from Berserk in a lot of those games. You can see it in Dark Souls 3 with the Eclipse. But yeah, it just doesn't really seem to happen for me. I mean, people are getting excited about Shadow of the Erdtree. I got hyped because a new trailer had been dropped for the next Life is Strange game, which brings back, because it brings back Max from the first game, and I'm a big Life is Strange fan, so I'm hyped for that. Elden Ring, just because I know that I won't play it, not so much. But it does look very, very cool. So I know a lot of people are hyped to jump back into that world. I wish I was joining them. It just doesn't happen for me. And the other problem is my PlayStation is downstairs in the living room. When I play Elden Ring in the past, I get focused in because you can't pause it. Like if you go into a boss fight, you can't pause it. And when I get focused on a game, my dog Bailey gets concerned, so he comes over to comfort me. And it's not very good when I'm trying to focus on a game and play, and all of a sudden I've got my dog there going, "You alright? You okay?" It's like, trying to focus, mate. Bugger off. Yeah, so have fun with that. And then last up on the news, Micah Monroe says They Follow will be a bigger, darker, and crazier sequel. Right up from John Squires. Announced earlier this year, Neon is behind an upcoming sequel to the horror hit It Follows, with writer-director David Robert Mitchell back to direct follow-up They Follow. Micah Monroe will reprise her role of Jay Height, which earned her an Empire Award nomination, and she teases the sequel in a new chat with Collider. In the first movie, Monroe's Jay Height is a young woman followed by an unknown supernatural force after a sexual encounter. In the sequel, the threat is now everywhere. David is brilliant, Monroe tells Collider. It Follows was changed in the game and the genre, and he wouldn't ever make a sequel if he didn't think he was going to top it. He just knows what he wants to do and what he wants to make. I mean, at first I'm like, oh, a sequel? Where are we going to go here? And I read it, and it's just so fucking good. It's so good. Monroe continues, I'm so excited. I think where you'll meet Jay at this point is maybe not what's expected, but it's so cool. It's just, of course, as everyone says for sequels, literally though, it's just bigger and darker and more fucked up. Reading it was the craziest thing ever. I'm so excited for this role. It's been a long time since I've been this excited to delve into something. There's a lot there to play with, and I think it's going to be incredibly challenging, for sure, but so fulfilling. Working with David, I can't wait. Monroe also tells the site. Stay tuned for more on They Follow as we learn it, and don't miss Mike Monroe alongside a Nicolas Cage in Neon's Long Legs, which brings bleak nightmare fuel to theatres on July 12th. I mean, I've made no secret the fact that I am hyped for They Follow. I loved It Follows. So, I mean, this is all good news to me. And the fact that next month, like literally less than a month away, we are getting Long Legs. Sign me up. That's a day one watch. That's a day one watch right there. So, that is it for the latest in the world of horror news. That was the news. Monsters! Oh, 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 oh. I'm so damn thirsty. Boom. Right, bosh. There we go. So, the first of today's reviews. Now, I mentioned in the Discord, if I get time, I'll try and do a retro review. I'd started watching the film. Time was just running out. I will try and finish watching the film after the show, or if not this weekend, and review it for next week's non-live podcast, which typically has the retro reviews anyway. But that was going to be Brain Scan, which looked to be quite an underrated early 90s techno horror starring Edward Furlong. So we don't have that, but we do have two new film reviews. The first up is the 2024 French action horror disaster film, Under Paris. I'm going to just have to quickly open the window. It's so damn hot in this room. The only reason I have had my window closed in my office is because it's really, really windy today. And so my blind has just been knocking back and forth, and it's really irritating me. So that starts up again. I have to close the window, but good Lord, it is warm. So, Under Paris is a 2024 French action horror disaster film directed by Xavier Gens, who co-wrote it with Yannick Dahan, Maud Hu Yang, and Jarl Langman. It stars Berenice Behl as a grieving marine biologist who is forced to face her tragic past in order to save Paris from a bloodbath when a giant shark appears in the scene. Produced on a budget of €19.6 million, the film was released on Netflix on the 3rd of June 2024, and initially received mixed to positive reviews, with some critics comparing it to Jaws and other films of the shark movie genre. Subsequent reviews have been less favourable. Okay. So, Victoria is a huge shark attack film fan. She likes animal attack films. It is funny because she likes these films when the attacks happen or there's certain bits of gore. She's like, oh God. So I'm like, you okay? I mean, we had it when we watched the bear attack film, Backward or Blackwood or whatever it's called, which is actually pretty good. But the bear attack in that was uber just... It's not what you saw, but it's what you heard in the aftermath of what you saw, which was just terrifying. Very well done, actually. But Under Paris... we watched the trailer beforehand. This is the film that we watched together when we got back from download. We just wanted to relax, rest up on the sofa in the living room, put a film on, and she was like, ooh, shark attack film on Netflix. We watched the trailer. Now, I straight away off the bat noticed that the dubbing was bad. And I thought, okay, this is a foreign language film. She hadn't noticed this. And I thought it makes sense, you know, Xavier Gens, he does do some English language films, but he also does some French language films because he's French. And the film starts, because we thought the trailer looked kind of decent. The film starts and, Eddie the Beast in the chat, what does Victoria think of the Meg and Meg 2? She loves them. I am not that fussed at all with the Meg. I thought the Meg 2 was actually quite fun. It's very over the top and silly, but it is quite funny in places. The Meg 1 didn't really do anything for me, but she loves both those films. So we started watching Under Paris, and after a few minutes of character dialogue, she goes, oh, this isn't English, is it? And I was just like, well, no, it's defaulted into dubbed. I mean, I would prefer to watch it with subtitles. I'm pretty tired. I don't know if I want to, read subtitles for an hour and a half, but if I'm watching a foreign language film, I do kind of prefer to watch it in its native tongue because it's just distracting when the dubbing's bad. And he was like, oh, God, I don't know how the dubbing is so bad in this. And it's like, well, it's translation at the end of the day, Sometimes a French phrase could be 5 words and in English it's 13. It's sometimes that's how it occurs. But we relented. We watched it in its dubbed form. So I'll start reading into the plot as we usually do. I'll read a bit of the plot, start talking about any sort of highs or lows, what I thought of it, and give you my review. So near the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, marine researcher Sophia Asalas and her team search for Lilith, a tagged short fin mako shark. Her husband Chris leads a dive team of Sam, Juan, and Tom, leaving Sophia and Jade on board. The team first observe an unusual sight of makers hunting in a pack before they locate Lilith, who has grown much larger since she was last sighted. With the shark appearing non-aggressive, Chris attempts to take a blood sample from Lilith, but the shark suddenly snaps and kills him, Sam, Juan, and Tom. Leaving the safety of the boat, Sophia goes after Lilith, but becomes entangled in a net and dragged far beneath the surface as the shark escapes into the depths. She manages to free herself, but not before suffering injuries due to the severe change in pressure. 3 years later, Sophia works at an aquarium in Paris. Micah, an environmentalist, informs Sophia that Lilith's tracking beacon is still active and that she has travelled from the Pacific and up the River Seine and is seemingly trapped in the city. After a man is found dead with wounds from shark bites, police diver Adil recruits Sophia to help find and kill the shark, but Mika and her girlfriend Ben turn off the beacon before they can do so, in the hope that they can rescue her later. Sophia and Adil petition the mayor of Paris to postpone the upcoming triathlon, but the mayor refuses, emphasizing the event's importance for focusing global attention on Paris during the run-up to the Olympic Games, which billions of euros have already been spent on. I thought it was important just to kind of continue reading that point, because I'll first now talk about some of the characterizations. The mayor has kind of got a small role there, but when the mayor appeared, I just couldn't help but start rolling my eyes, because it's such a one-dimensional character. Now, it could be that the voice actor for the mayor was particularly hammy, maybe, but oh my god, it just came across as such a joke. Like, when they approach her and say, it looks as though there is a shark which is trapped in the Seine, and we can't have this triathlon. And people don't know a triathlon includes swimming. It's because it's dangerous. You know, this is killing people. And the mayor's like, look at this amazing event that we've got planned. We've spent billions on it. Look at all the revenue that will come through from it. And you want to stop all that for a shark? It's just the typical, I'm a mayor, money, money, money. It was really one-dimensional. But like I say, to give the benefit of the doubt, I don't know if it's just the performance in the native language may have seemed better. But it was pretty shonky, the performance there. There's also some plot points that just don't really actually seem to go anywhere. So in the opening part of the film, when Sophia goes after Lilith's gone on a rampage, and you don't see too much of the rampage, which is more hinted at, which I do think, okay, well, that's fine. I mean, in a modern shark attack film, I like subtlety, but you can't have constant subtlety. You know, I've seen it before with, I think it was either the Reef, I think it might have been the Reef, where each of the shark attacks had that subtle approach where it was like someone just suddenly getting shaken and pulled underwater, and then you saw blood appear on top of the water. First time that happens, oh, okay, wow, that's takes you by surprise. But then each time that happens, it's like, okay, we've seen that death like 5 times now. You know, you want to see something a bit different. We do get that with this, because the first few deaths are really kind of quick and rapid. You don't really see much of what's going on. I'm talking about one negative plot point, which is reminding me of another. I'll quickly talk about the other, and that is shaky cam. There's a few moments with the shark attacks where they do this, cameras going all over the place, shaking all over the place, and I get the point of that is to disorientate you and, oh my god, what's happening? I feel like I'm there in the panic when everyone's running around. But from a viewing perspective, it's just uncomfortable. It's just, to me, it instantly reminded me of watching like the Transformers films. You know, I've seen the first couple and I was just like, just not for me. I can't really tell what's going on. It's just cameras swinging all over the place and, you know, robots that are both just grey smashing through buildings. Like, I don't know what's happening. There's no, you know, I don't like that approach. Didn't like that. But also, in terms of plot points, when Sophia goes down and Lilith suddenly swims away from her, but Lilith has this bit of, I don't know, reed or something that tangles onto Sophia's foot, starts dragging her deeper and deeper. That moment is quite tense. You know, you can see that she's starting to get pressure damage. Her nose and her ears start bleeding. When she gets loose, she has to quickly get to the surface, which can cause the bends from pressure. And you think then that would be a bit of a plot point for later on. And there's a moment where she gets a nosebleed. It doesn't lead to anything though. And I remember there's a part in the finale, and I won't say too much about the finale, but in the kind of the lead up, there's a moment when you think, oh, the reason that moment happened at the start of the film with the air pressure going underwater, the depths and all that stuff, that's going to play a point later on where she's going to have to overcome that, or she's going to maybe suffer from repercussions of repeating that activity, something along those lines. Like there's a reason why that happened, narratively. No. No. It just happened. It has no relevance on what happens later in the film. Okay, fine. Doesn't have to, but just I would have thought that would be, a bit of a callback, a continuation and development. I don't know. So those are a couple of negatives, but the shark attacks are pretty good. They're pretty gnarly, pretty violent. There's a moment where a bunch of these eco-warriors are having this big rally in the city catacombs about, you can't hurt sharks because sharks are part of our wildlife ecosystem. It's like, yeah, okay, we get that, but there's also sharks eating people. So something has to, you can't just blindly ignore that. Something has to occur. Anyway, so she's clearly playing on, it's this young girl. It's clearly like a analogy or something of Greta Thunberg, perhaps, was maybe an inspiration. I don't know, but typically it all goes to shit. The shark goes buck wild in this enclosure. Everyone's running away, trying to run away, falling in the water. People are getting chomped up left, right, and centre. Ignore my dog's barking. I think that means my girlfriend's home. I'll go and chat to her shortly when the show finishes. The attacks there are pretty good. But as the film progresses, we then get to the finale. There's a moment where me and Victoria just both looked at each other and laughed because we thought, what the fuck was that? When during this plan that the protagonists have that involves setting off explosions, I'll be vague, I don't want to give anything too much away. The explosions happen, and you've got a couple of the other protagonists on a boat. The explosion happens out of the water, so they suddenly go, whoa, boat, spin around in a circle. And they just do a circle and then come to a stop exactly where they were before. It's just like, what the hell was the point of that? The explosion wasn't that close to them. It wasn't like they were evading it. They've just suddenly gone, like on a horse, whoa, Nelly, calm down, girl, but on a boat in water. It's a bit weird. It was a bit of a weird film. In terms of score, then, I mean, the performances in this were fine. I mean, so the main ones were Berenice Bejo as Sophia and Nassim Adil. They're the stars of the film. Okay, their performances were fine. I mean, again, we're watching this in dubbing, so whoever did the dubbed voices, they did a fine job for those characters, I'd say. The Mayor of Paris, Anna Marvin, I don't know if it's the performance, I don't know if it's the dubbing, they were terrible. They were just bad. But if you like a shark attack film, it's probably worth a watch. We didn't think much of the ending, quite frankly. I think my score is a bit slightly higher than what Victoria's score was for this. I can't remember exactly. But I think she gave it a 2 out of 10. I'm going to give it a 4 out of 10 because I do think the shark attacks were pretty good. And I don't want to judge it too harshly for the dubbing because it's just the Mayor of Paris stands out like a sore thumb in terms of the characterization is one thing that's bad. The performance was very, ha-ha, I'm the mayor, money, money, money. I won't let you ruin my event. You have to deal with it and quietly. It was very cheesy, very generic. So I'm going to give Under Paris 4 out of 10. Now, the other film I've managed to squeeze in, just so I could get it reviewed for today, is The Exorcism, 2024 American supernatural horror film starring Russell Crowe as Anthony Miller, an actor whose deteriorating mental state on a horror movie set causes his daughter Lee, played by Ryan Simpkins, to suspect either his former addictions or a more sinister cause. Directed by Joshua John Miller from a script he co-wrote with M.A. Fortin, So Sam Worthington, Chloe Bailey, Adam Goldberg, Adrian Pasdar, and David Hyde Pierce. Okay. So I've not seen The Pope's Exorcist. And I know that there's a lot of confusion when you have 1 year with an exorcism film with Russell Crowe and then another year another film. I don't know if they were filmed at similar times or one was filmed a long time ago and then they happened to just get released within like a year or so of each other. I think it's about a year, really. Because that can happen. Films can stay on the block for a little while before getting released for whatever reason. Or just filmed at separate times and released in line with the film's completion, and that it's that. It's just a little bit rare to have an actor release one exorcism film after another. I can't really think of that. I don't know. It just seems a bit niche, right? But I don't know, man. Maybe he just likes the role. But anyway, he's playing an actor in this film who's joining a production. Fran in the chat in regards to Under Paris, 2 and 4 out of 10 sounds more of a shart attack. Yeah, it's the attacks are decent. The film itself's not so much. But The Exorcism, it opens with an actor going around a film set, and the film set is one of the best set pieces I've kind of seen in a film in recent years. Don't take that praise too highly, but the film set in this does look great. This actor is going around running his lines around the set. I think it's Adrian Pasdar in quite a small role, who people may know from Near Dark, also Heroes. And he's going around reading these lines, and then all of a sudden the lights start flickering. A image of, it's like an imprint of a hand around his throat starts tightening, resulting in his death, which leads to the script coming to Anthony Miller, played by Russell Crowe, who has been going through a really dark period. We don't get the full ins and outs of it, but it appears to be heavy addiction, alcohol, drug addiction, whatnot, which caused a lot of neglect, and his wife has passed away in this time. So he's got quite a... It's not it's not so much a fractious relationship with his daughter, Lee, played by Ryan Simpkins, but she always refers to him as Tony. Doesn't refer to him as Dad. But she's trying to be there for him, to help him. There's a two-parter to that, where she's also just recently been thrown out of college for bit of like protesting, but it's not the exact cause, but along those lines. So she also kind of needs the help. So it's kind of a bit of a two-way street, and he joins this project, but he has been out of the acting world for a while. This is, it's one of those things where, do we want to touch working with this guy with a 5 to 10 foot barge pole? I don't know. It's a bit of a risk. But he is trying. He's trying with his lines. Something's not quite working, but he's trying. Sam Worthington's playing another role of a priest who he really looks up to Russell Crowe's character. Chloe Bailey is also working on the film, and David Hyde Pierce is an actual priest who has come to be on set. The reason being, there's all these superstitions in regards to doing a supernatural religious-based film in Hollywood, based on, as they mention in the film, the events of The Omen, the events of The Exorcist, and it's implied that this is a remake of The Exorcist. It's called The Georgetown Project, is the film within the film, and The Exorcist was set in Georgetown, I'm pretty sure. And the screenplay seems to parallel that in terms of the film within the film. But as we go on, we've also got Adam Goldberg as Peter, the director, who is trying to get a good performance out of Russell Crowe. But as it's going on, you can see he's a bit of a scumbag and his patience is wearing thin. Anthony has also got a lot of trauma from his past. All I'll say is he used to be an altar boy growing up in the Catholic Church. Just make of that what you will. But as the film is progressing, the production's progressing, Anthony's behaviour is becoming a little bit more questionable. He's having some instances around his daughter where she's really worried because he just does not seem himself, and there seems to be something potentially taking over. So that's kind of all I'll say for now. there is potential in this for a pretty good Exorcist film. I will say that it doesn't nail it. It doesn't hit it out of the park. It has been getting some quite negative reviews, but I don't know if that's necessarily just people dunking on Russell Crowe for the sake of it. That seems to happen when actors go through a period where they've previously been doing Oscar-winning roles and then they're sort of not in that same sort of limelight anymore. I don't know if that's the case. I definitely don't think it's terrible. There is a good film potential in there. It's shot very, very well. Some of the shots that Joshua John Miller gets are actually pretty darn nice. And I really like the set piece of the set because you've got this enormous 3 or 4 story building in a soundstage with half of the wall taken off because that's where they shoot the camera for. And that looks really great. Really, some really nice scenes there. They almost don't do enough with that in some senses later on, where you could really use that for some stage accidents. But we get some elements of gore in this, little, very, very brief. It's not a super gory film. It's more of a psychological, supernatural horror. Russell Crowe's performance, I think, is pretty darn good. And I think the standout is probably Ryan Simpkins as Lee Miller, the daughter. Her role in this is actually, she performs very, very well. I recognise her. I can't say what I've seen her in. Yeah, maybe Fear Street. I've seen the first 2 Fear Street films. I think she's in them, but I can't really remember. But she performs very, very well in this film. Just have a quick little look if there's anything else. She was in Twixt, which I don't remember anything about. I thought that was quite wank. Yeah, I don't know. I don't recognise any of these other projects, so yeah, don't know. Very, very good in this. David Hyde Pierce, quite a subdued role. I mean, it's nice to see him in things. He was obviously Niles in Frasier. And he did do a horror film, I think it's called The Perfect Guest, a little while ago, when someone breaks into his house to rob him, but then it turns out he's a serial killer. It's actually pretty decent. It's a nice little indie horror, indie light thriller. Definitely one worth a watch. I think you can find it on Prime these days, but I would have to say, Eddie the Beast in the chat, films should always have a TES rating before it releases. I'd have to say his performance in this is pretty good. I think everyone does a pretty good job in this. I don't think the problems with this film are the acting. Like, I think the acting is probably one of the standout points in this, and I think the score is pretty good in this as well. And like I say, it's shot really well. It just seems to take some narrative jumps. I don't know if it necessarily needed to be longer or if it just needed to be paced a bit better. Because when the possession, and I don't think there's a spoiler to say there's a possession, the film's called The Exorcism, but when the possession starts happening, it almost feels like it goes from taking too long to being rushed, which I know is quite a strange complaint to have, but it does feel like in both senses that it hasn't allowed the possession time to breathe, but at the same point it kind of has, but it hasn't really given us that much information as to, well, how has this occurred? And I guess the idea being that it's doing a blasphemous film, because this is what happened to the first actor taking on the role. I don't know. It didn't feel that it necessarily nailed that element of the plot. There is a further development on that in the finale, which I think goes to explain why certain things have occurred. It does lead to quite a bloody finale, which I thought, okay, I mean, is that all right in the grand scheme of things as to what actually goes down? I'm not entirely sure how the court of law would look at that, which, again, very vague. Don't want to give any spoilers away. But I did think, okay, kind of cool, but at the same point, I'm not too sure about that. But I think there is potential in this. I do think there's potential in this. I didn't have a bad time watching it. I just felt the pacing was at times a bit off, and there would just seem to be some jumps in the possession. This feel. I know I normally prefer a short film. This feels like it probably just needed a bit more time to breathe, and it would have been pretty good. Like, I think if this had gone just under 2 hours, you built up that possession a bit more. You then provided a bit more exposition on the detailing of what is going on, behind the scenes, without giving everything away. You don't need to, signpost everything. I think it would have been a more enjoyable overall experience. But as it was, I didn't have a terrible time watching it. I can't compare it to the Pope's Exorcist because I haven't seen that one yet, but it was decent. I certainly don't think it was as bad as it's been made out to be in other outlets. I'm gonna give The Exorcism 6 out of 10. I'm gonna give it 6 out of 10. And that is all for this week's live edition of the Ministry of Horror. Do stick around for a quick chat. We talk a bit about wrestling and ups and downs, not like Simon Miller, but a little bit about that, what I've watched and all that stuff, and have a little drink, have a snack or two. We'll have a brief chat about that. But if you have been watching this live on twitch.tv/Tezius, TEZZIUS, or if you haven't, be sure to give the channel a follow. Check out the show. Give us a follow. I will occasionally stream games. I'm not going to commit to when, because who knows. But give the channel a follow. This will also then go out onto YouTube. Search for Ministry of Horror. Give the channel a sub. It goes out on podcast platforms as well. Give us a follow if you like listening to audio podcasts on there. And next week will be the non-live edition, dropping, who knows, at some point later in the week, no doubt. But I'm going to finish up the recording right now. So catch you later.